Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you are keeping safe. Welcome to the FIDIC State of the World webinar, where we're looking at digital disruption and the evolution of the infrastructure sector. You are welcome to be with us, and I know that we have people from all over the world who are joining us. I'm informed that we have close to 800 people who register for this particular program. We're delighted. And I hope that wherever you are going to join us for this 1 hour, 30 minutes. I understand that we have people from United Kingdom, from Australia, Japan, United Arab Emirates, United States, Turkey, and India, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia, and the list goes on. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you are keeping safe, and thank you for joining us. This State of the World report is really one of many that is coming through. FIDIC are involved with quite a lot of activities. This is one of our initiatives, and I'm pleased that you're able to join us today. This is the first one in 2022. We have done a few in the past. Next slide, please. We have done a few in the past. I think it's important that I just bring you up to speed on some of our other activity. As a result of the COP26 last year, we embarked on this thing called FIDIC for Global Goals, where we are actually looking at all our activities and we are packaging them under what we call FIDIC campaign activity on climate change, which is introducing FIDIC for Global Goal, the campaign and branding, pull together all our activity and covers it as the charter, which we issued last year. If you haven't signed up, I would suggest now to go and sign up. It's about promoting, for design, all sorts of things is available. We've done a lot on the COP26. And also we are doing quite a lot on, the net zero. So please join us wherever you are in helping us to promote this campaign. This is very important for the global industry where we can bring our expertise together. So next slide, please. So what do we have today? We are focusing on our State of the World report, but among other things we do, we look at our FIDIC committee webinar. There is one coming up next week on the 12th of April, where we're looking at the subject of procurement and integrity and preventing demand side of corruption at all level. I suspect at a point in time, we also need to look at the supply side of the issue. We are also looking at next State of the World report, which will be 23rd of June, and that is coming through. And then as well, we have our conference from 11 to 20 of May, which is looking at the FIDIC Contract Users Conference at the region in Asia, in Africa, in North America, and Latin America. That is coming through. Next slide, please. So what do we have today? The journey so far, the State of the World. This is not the first one. As I said, we've done it in a series. We used to produce a lot of big documents called State of the World in 2015 and 2017. And they tend to be big, but we've decided we need to break down into a manageable chunk. And next slide, we'll probably see that the journey we've traveled so far. Last year, we issued 5 State of the World report. The first one look at, time to invest. Then we look at how do we look at the value of water, and then look at, how do we actually look at capturing the global water issue. And we look at building sustainable community in the post-COVID world. And then just as part of the, COP26, we issued the net zero. What's next? And today we are looking at digital disruption in our sector. So this is part of the journey that we are pursuing. With that in mind, I'm pleased to tell you that, I'm delighted that this report is out, and it's better to be late than never, but it's out on time. Moving to the next slide. What do we have? It's an opportunity for you to join in the conversation. But before we start, we have a poll. We should have an opportunity for you to vote. And the question is very simple. Is the infrastructure sector prepared for a potential technology disruptor, such as Uber or Google data provider of infrastructure performance? This is an opportunity for you. Are we ready or not? This is a question for all the audience. Please, time for you to vote. It's a simple yes or no. Is the infrastructure ready? Prepare for a potential technology disruptor. I just need to get a feel from the industry as to how you feel the market is ready. Are we ready or not? Time to vote, time to vote, time to vote. So I'll probably say, Liz, can you give us the result if the result is known? I have 33% say yes and 67% said no. So that is quite interesting. Because what that tells us is that our industry is not ready. So that's interesting. That's a good point to start off with the conversation. So at this point in time, I think we can go into the mainstream of the particular program. So I get that impression. It's pretty disappointing that we can say that there's a lot going on in the world on digital disruption. and yet our industry is not ready or not prepared for it. At this point in time, I think it's important that I introduce, Graham Pontin, who is our head of economic and strategy policy. Graham has been behind our policy activity and all the report that you've seen before, and making sure that everything we do is very much in alignment with corporate plan. So Graham, it's the time for you to give us a snippet, and I mean a snippet of the report, which is now, I believe, is available on our website, and people can download it, and there will be a lot of press releases this afternoon that will be following that. So Graham, the floor is yours. Give us 5-6 minutes, a summary of the report, so that at least we can dive into the conversation with all the experts that I have with me. So Graham, take the floor. Thank you,
Nelson. So this report, talking about technology, it starts by looking at the pace of technological change and how significant it is. Many of the technology companies we use today are actually very young in the context of companies traditionally, as longevity of companies and how long they actually operate for is actually declining. It then turns around and suggests not only the change of pace is faster, but a lot of the companies we may be dealing with now we're going to be dealing with them in 10 years' time, which obviously for infrastructure that takes a long time and has long operating times is a challenge. The report then goes into the role of a potential disruptor and how it might change a business model in the sector. The converse of that is the report then looks at the role of technology as an innovator and how the sector can turn around and actually engage or even take a proactive role in this. It then looks at how the sector can embrace data and technology. And then finally, it looks at the communication aspect, because actually how we talk to each other and how we even communicate with customers and users of infrastructure is going to change. So if I break down some of those into a bit more detail, if you look at the lifespan of companies, in the last 50 years, it's reduced from an average company lasting 32 years to 21 years. So in the course of 50 years, that's quite a significant shift. If you look at most of the technology companies that are out there, they've been about in the last 20 years, or they were established by people who were between the ages of 16 and 24, which is quite unusual. The only exception I could find to that was Nintendo, which was actually formed in 1889, but didn't actually become a technology company until 1977. But it took me a while to find an exception. So if we look at what this means for the sector and how the markets are evolving, the report talks about the fact that you used to be able to have parts of the sector work individually, and there were silos between them, and you would pass parts of the data on, whereas actually they're increasingly becoming overlapped, a bit like a Venn diagram. And the interactions between these means that data is taken and technology is taking a more prominent role across a whole range of activities from start to end. This means that someone in the technology or data space, if they were a disruptor, could influence a very large amount of the business model for the sector in a very quick or a very significant fashion. So the report says, what are the signs of a potential disruptor? So the first one we talk about is the fact that venture capitalists are increasingly interested in the sector. The second one is that technology is generally used to cut costs, which given the last 2 years of COVID and how we're all meeting online, is quite an interesting inference and could cause some debate. We also look at the fact that if the industry has an aging customer base, this generally turns around and encourages disruption. And also if the industry has few customer digital touch points. And then finally, customer satisfaction. Generally, where customer satisfaction is low, you're more likely to get disruption. We then turn this on its head and say, well, okay, for the sector, how is technology acting as an innovator? We discuss big data, the power of dashboarding and live reporting as information on operations and maintenance is becoming more real time. The crowdsourcing and communication with customers, for example, in disaster areas where actually information is sent out much faster and engagement is happening. Cybersecurity and the importance of that. The fact that even training is changing with virtual reality. Technology and safety. So, for example, you can use cameras and drones to do things which would have required people. And then we talk about the fifth industrial revolution. I know you'd argue we haven't finished the fourth, but that builds sustainability in the environment into everything. And as we say, when we're talking about rolling out 5G now, the industry is already developing 6G. Finally, we then go into how this affects the sector. So the first one is the market options. Does the sector embrace data? And what does that mean for the sector? Does the sector continue its traditional approach? And how does that mean it affects it? And then finally, what happens if a disruptor enters? So those are the market options we discuss. And then within that, you turn around and have how the sector embraces the change. Do we turn around and take a stable approach where we act the way we do in a framework that is similar to now? Do we become an adaptive sector where we have an improved role in that role, but realize we're not technology companies? Or do we take a progressive role in actually leading this change and trying to build the infrastructure sector in a way where data and technology is through the organizations? And if that's the case, what kind of organization would you be? Are you going to end up a full data structured organization? Will you be an organization that's aiming to be there but doesn't actually go all of the way to totally integrated? Or would you be in what we call an extinct structure organization where the rest of the world has moved on, but your operating model is something akin to what we see today? Out of this, the report makes 4 recommendations. Most of these are targeted around actually creating, if you like, more detailed views into some of these issues going forward, because this is an overarching view of how technology and disruption could occur, and it is happening. So if we look at recommendation 1, it suggests that with FIDIC's Global Leadership Forum that was established, the sector should look to establish a 5, 10, 20-year view strategically of how it thinks it's going to adapt and change. That's not only with regards to the SDGs and net zero, but also with regards to technology. The second recommendation is that FIDIC helps its member associations with technology and tools for things like social media and communication where it can. The third recommendation is, the third and fourth recommendation are around the digital transformation committee that FIDIC launched this week alongside this report. One, to look at the challenges of meeting the SDGs and how data and technology can help that. And the second one is how to set up a task group on how FIDIC itself and its contracts need to evolve, because FIDIC is not immune to technological change itself. We have to work with the sector to ensure that we know and we are in the place we need to be in 5, 10 years' time. And with that, I'll hand back over to you, Nelson.
Thank you very much, Graham. That was a very speedy overview of that. I like the way you challenge the industry, because your 4 points is really not about everybody else, it's really about FIDIC and how the world is going to engage. Let me just pick up a few points that you actually raised there that really resonate with me, because the way you said it, you started by saying, what are the big key driver? What are the evidence that we can see? The pace of change. And interesting, me going through that document, I was actually quite intrigued that you talk about the age profile of those people who are breaking the new barrier. And you didn't talk about that in this, but the report you actually mentioned people like Elon Musk. You talk about, Bill Gates, and you compare the age and the timeline. You also look at issue about Mark Zuckerberg and what sort of age profile he was in, which I think is quite intriguing. But then you move on into Dell and say, well, look at the profile and the age, which I find very useful. You also pick up the issue about the model, which I think is interesting by making a comparison. What is the driver? Who are coming to the market that may help us to break? Venture capital is always the case because they want maximum for their buck. And if they think our industry is slack and we're not efficient, they come in and actually be a potential disruptor. You look at the technology side, which I think is quite interesting, look at the issue about dashboarding and how that can be very relevant because it's a signal for us. And I've been on a project now where those projects, you need dashboard that really can give indication as progress that you're making at every point. You talk about training, you talk about technology safety, which I find very useful. Then look at the market entrance, which I think is something that we take for granted because our industry tends to be static. It's the same people, but we've also seen people, consolidation that is happening in our industry, and there's sign that market disruptor is going to hit us. And then how is the market embracing? I think I like the way you break it down. The sort of who is embracing the data, who are the traditional approach, and who are the disruptor. I think that was quite interesting. What I find very useful in the way you've packaged this is the 4 challenges that you've left. And I'm glad to say that we've actually taken one of the challenge there, which is we recognize that this digital issue is here to stay. Because you mentioned that are we actually still on 4th industrial revolution, or are we really on the clock of 5th? And there's a debate as to where we are in that process. And I think you left up with that challenge. So with the 4 recommendations, which I like quite well, and I'm sure the FIDIC board will be interesting to see how we move that forward. Let me call on the expert. Let me call on the expert, because I'm not an expert in the field. There are people who are experts here. And what I see, you've got people like Microsoft. You got people from the insurance market. We got people who are engineers. We've got people who are in the legal world. And to me, it seems to me, these are the people that we should be talking to. So with Kevin Reeves, with Marcial Earp, with Artur Brito, with Marcial Rivera, and Madam Stacy Sinclair. So I've got 5 good people here to start off with. Let me start by welcoming them to this meeting. Kevin and Michael and Arthur, Marcial and Stacy, welcome and thank you very much for your time into this. I know some of you, this is pretty early for you, so I will be kind to you to make sure that I don't ask you difficult questions, but I suspect that there is Microsoft. We can all throw the question at Kevin. Who is Microsoft? I have got a confession. He was telling me he found it very difficult to upload the background, which I can't believe, but he did. So let me start off. Let me start off with Kevin. Kevin, you are the Microsoft guy, and I believe you are in UK, which is quite interesting. By the way, we got a collection of people from different parts of the world. Kevin is actually from UK. Michael is actually in the United States. And I understand Artur Brito, if I've got it right, is actually in Sao Paulo. Is it Sao Paulo? Have I got it right? And then you've got Marcial, who's actually Costa Rica. And then Stacy is in Cambridgeshire, of course, in the sunny part of Cambridgeshire. So I've got them right in the right way. So Kevin, let me start with the first question to you. And I'm going to be as bold as I'm going to be. You told me offline that I can throw any question at you and you'll be willing to answer it. So I'm going to make you the person to start off and kickstart. So I'll say to you, Kevin, how do you see the sector evolving to enable scale data sharing and sector level insight in support of common imperative like net zero? How do you see the sector responding to your big question?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thanks, Nelson. That's a good question as well. And I managed to find the mute button, so that's good.
Good on you.
Yeah, I think that taking a UK-wide perspective, I think what's great is we're not starting from ground zero. There's been an awful lot of work over the last 10 years to build a model around collaborative alliances. So in the UK, we're lucky to have the Infrastructure Client Group, and that is basically a group of leading owner-operators across energy, water, transport, defence, who've come together to define how do we really accelerate delivery of major infrastructure programmes. And actually it has its roots in Anglian Water's At1 Alliance. Anglian Water is one of the water companies in the UK. So they looked at the successes of Anglian Water and said, right, how do we copy that? How do we turn that into a blueprint that we can take forwards across industry? Now, what's really important about that alliance model that is now used really widely, by the way, HS2, National Highways Network Rail, a lot of the big own operators have adopted this model. What it's underpinned by, though, is digital and data. So effectively creating a digital environment that allows the various organisations within the alliance to come together to share data, to help provide insight, to automate process, and all the things that you would expect from digital technology. Now, as Microsoft, obviously, we have a key role. Clients use our technology for that kind of scaled integration. And we're starting to look now and say, well, what if we took that approach and we shone the same lens on net zero? Could we use that same kind of digital collaborative approach to help tackle some of these common challenges? And the reason we're picking up on the Project 13 model is, the net zero challenge is so large, no one organisation is going to solve it alone. We need to work together and collaborate to kind of unlock the future. And one of the ways that we can do that is by using digital and data technologies to help us accelerate and move at the right pace. The targets that have been set by UK government, they're really bold. And we're going to need to fundamentally change the way in which we deliver to meet some of those targets, both in terms of capital delivery, but also in terms of operational efficiency as well. So we're looking at the role of digital and data to help organisations come together and drive new insights, so we can make key investment decisions much faster, but more importantly, optimise every stage of the asset lifecycle.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Well, that's interesting to see what's going on in the UK and how the collaborative world is coming together. I mean, that's very impressive. I'm pleased with that. Let me just press on you on the same tone, because I think I like the idea, because it seems to me that the UK, you talk about the Infrastructure Client Group. They're taking the initiative, the Anglian experience, and that's been the boilerplate that you're building on. But the point that I was going to put across to you, Kevin, is that the COVID itself has been a disruptor to many of us. We know that. Earlier, before we came on live, we're joking about, we're going to back into the rat race of jumping on the aircraft and going to conference and all of that. But for God's sake, we've done so many conferences online. So the COVID server has been a disruptor to many sectors. It's not just infrastructure sector, and create a significant shift to cloud, system. What can we learn from this shift? And how do you put that emphasis on shifting in technology that can help us to achieve the net zero, still building on that net zero? Because the word you pick up earlier on was about data mining, collaboration, and collaborative contract. Now, it takes two to tango, Kevin. You know that, and I know that. Yeah. The industry is so, fragmented, and not a lot of clients. Sometimes they talk about it, but they don't really, play it. So how do you think, the COVID has shaped? And do you think the client get it? Does the industry get it?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, to put it into context, at the start of the pandemic, we saw 2 years worth of transformation happen in 2 months. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And it wasn't kind of new activity. It was just an acceleration of existing digital transformation plans. But it just gave that impetus for organizations to remove some of the internal red tape and just get on and crack on and do what was needed to be done. Obviously, that was driven by people working from home, the need for kind of remote working. But the pace at which people moved was genuinely unbelievable. And you can say the same actually in other areas. If you look at the ventilator challenge, 10 years worth of ventilators manufactured in 10 weeks. And again, that was because government, academia, industry got together and said, look, we need to address this challenge and we need to do it quickly. So again, the red tape was removed. Some of the traditional bureaucracy that we all enjoy kind of was moved out of the way, and it enabled that pace. And I think that we're going to see exactly the same with net zero. I do a lot of work in the energy industry, and if you look at the energy strategy in the UK that was released today, big focus on nuclear, hydrogen, an increase in renewables. And in 8 years, we've got to deliver what would normally take probably 2 or 3 decades. So we've got to move at unprecedented pace. And what digital and data can help us to do is to collaborate, particularly across sectors, which is becoming even more important, to be able to drive the insight that we need to be able to move at that pace. We need to be able to make decisions much more quickly. We need to be able to remove the administrative burden, automate things where we can to streamline the whole process. So, having learned what we've learned from the pandemic, we know we can move at pace when we need to. And I strongly believe, and Microsoft believes, that net zero is going to be a key driver to help us radically change business models that will involve collaboration at scale.
Kevin, thank you very much for that. I'm really pleased the way you've sort of picked up some of the groundbreaking solution that we came out with as a result of COVID. I suspect one of them that you didn't mention, which is profound, is the vaccination, which normally takes years and years and years and years of testing. And the bureaucracy that goes through that, we cut through that. Otherwise, you and I will not be talking now. We've got vaccination done, which is quicker. The other one, which I think is quite relevant, is how quickly people move into this online working Zoom. And maybe I can put a plug in for Microsoft. How quickly Microsoft is matured, though, very quickly into having teams being built up and so no competition to Zoom. But I mean, just put it that way, that's a major shift in culture. And I think you are absolutely right that we need to look at the barrier to innovation and see how we cut through that chase. And I suspect partly, construction sector tend to be very traditional. We don't often wake up to this thing, and that's why in the vote that we did earlier on, only 33% felt that our industry is ready for disruption, which is pretty sad. Pretty sad. Now, if we're going to achieve that net zero, one of the things that is critical that we always talk about is about the risk side of it. And the risk side is how do we deal with the risk side? So on this point, I'm going to call my good friend, Mr. Earp, who I've just woke up in Nashville, I understand, somewhere in United States of America. And I think I'll put a question to you because, what Kevin has done is that we've got to break the barrier. We've got to fast track. We've got to learn on the data mining. We've got to collaborate. And I hear from you to say it's a risk, it's a risk, it's a risk, because we're not going through the traditional mode. So Michael, the question to you, what is the difference between the cyber and technology error and omission and exposure? Because to me, I think this is one of the reasons why our industry is so conservative. We build factor of safety into everything we do. And we don't want to take any shortcut. We try as much as possible to build resilience into our system. Sometimes we're not doing enough. So the question to you, Michael, what is the difference between the cyber, and technological error and omission and exposure? Because if we are going to break the barrier, if we are going to fast track this process, there will be an element of that. So Michael, what's your take on that subject?
Yeah, Nelson, so thank you very much indeed for the question. I think there has been so much in the press about cyber attacks and whatever that everyone is very, very concerned about the advancement of the digital transformation, and that perhaps there are risks associated with this, and that insurance may or may not be covering it. In fact, having insurance may be a precursor to people actually trying to make hacks. And so therefore we get lots of questions, and we're now seeing it appearing in contracts where people are saying, have you got cyber coverage? Have you got technology errors and emissions insurance? And lots of people don't realize what is the difference between these two particular types of risk. So quite simply, technology errors and emissions is akin to your professional indemnity, professional liability. It's for third-party claims that are made against you because you are using technology in isolation or in conjunction with the delivery of your own professional services. Cyber, on the other hand, is to protect you for your first-party risks if you get hacked. There are some liability elements to it, but predominantly, it's all about the first party side of it. Now, insurance policies have got compendium policies that will cover you for your professional liability, your pollution liability, for these technology-based services, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Technology products. A lot of the architects and engineers today are actually providing some form of product with their services, particularly in relation to technology. But the big risk of cyber is all around the computer network security, where there's destruction of deletion of data, there's theft of data, denial of service, and ransomware. So what it's very important to understand is, should these risks be insured together or should they be insured separately? So a few years ago, we saw people bundling policies together, including cyber, and I was never a fan of this. I always said no, because cyber is much cheaper. Buy separately, don't have dilution of your expensive professional indemnity, professional liability limits by cyber. Well, now we've seen lots of claims coming in, and the cyber market has exploded price-wise. We're seeing rate increases of up to 500% on previous years. And also the coverage you get on a standalone cyber policy is much more than you would get in a bundled compendium policy, where essentially the cyber there is no more than really a band-aid. So the raft of claims that come in, Lloyd's of London have made a firm statement that you either actually have to affirm cyber coverage, or you need an exclusion to exclude what's called silent cyber out of any insurance policy. And so therefore, we are now seeing exclusions being put on professional indemnity, professional liability, and general liability policies, excluding cyber, forcing people to go and buy this first-party cyber insurance, which is now very expensive. So I think one of the main differences is that people are now understanding what cyber is there to cover and what professional liabilities cover. But that as well comes with a risk, because you think, well, we can put the technology errors and emissions into our professional indemnity policy. Yes, but you have to make sure that you have the right wording for technology services as a specific professional service. Why? because we are now getting to a situation where our architects and engineers are actually providing technology services distinct from normal architecture and engineering. So the message quite simply is they are different, buy the right policy, and make sure you've got the right wording on your professional indemnity. Does that help, Nelson?
Honestly, Michael, you've done it in a way that you've addressed the second question I was going to put across to you, but I'm still going to come back to you. But let me just put that into context. What you've said there is actually saying, look, in the early days, people were bundling PI with cybersecurity issue. And the truth of the matter is we were so naive of the issue because we didn't understand the scale of it. And what we now have is a proper way to go forward is a separate cover, because a separate cybersecurity, cover is more detailed, is more, broader. And those who started with a joined up issue, they now have issue because the exclusion is now being thrown into that. That means price on. That takes me to the next question. And the next question I was going to put across to you. So from that point of view is, how is professional indemnity insurance changing now because of the digital transformation? Now, Kevin talked about we need to break the ground. We need to do things in an orthodox manner. We need to push the envelope. So the question I'm having is, how is the PI market changing because of digital transformation? What's your response?
So, yeah, and that's an excellent question. And it's something we have taken to insurers. We're saying, like, Mr. Insurer, if our people are using digital appliances and whatever in helping the industry, what sort of discount are you going to give us? Because, hopefully that the digital transformation will help risk eventually. And so what we've done was we've isolated probably 6 or 7 areas which we think that insurance has to address. Firstly is we need to look at how can insurance help with the productivity, including risk reducing technology. And that's the form of collection of data and using that and feeding that back to help monitoring claims. We have to think about aware of the predictive job site, the Internet of Things and machine learning. That should help also greatly in respect of body injury, workman type issues that happen on site. Most important and the biggest challenge, a common data platform. My goodness, will we ever get there? I could do a whole half an hour on that as well. We'll talk also about the digital twin, single federated digital platform. These are sort of aspirations of we get to a data platform, but how do we make it through the whole life of a facility, building, or whatever? Joining it all together. And then that links into enterprise and project data strategy. And lastly, data sharing alliances. Each of those, we have challenged the insurers. Where can you actually provide value for this? And what sort of discounts do you get back? And I think the last one there was the single digital platform for all those in the built environment. That is, nirvana, for where I think we want to go. So I haven't really answered your question at all. I'm just saying these are the questions we're asking insurers, and we're asking for them to help and provide solutions, not just professional liability, but all types of insurance, because it all links into with the property insurance when it's built, the liability insurance, the body injury when it's being built. All of this comes together, and it has to be this holistic approach. Common data platform.
Yeah, you may think you haven't answered my question, but you have done so. You're being cheeky to me. I'm following you because I think if I know the insurance market very well, I do. If I know the insurance very well, whether you are a broker or underwriter, it's really about the transparency in the way business is modeled. If the business model is changing, and I think those 6 points that you raised is basically the question you are putting to the underwriter for them to have a better understanding of how our industry is changing and to enable them to move from the traditional perception to the new world. Of course, there's a risk in the new world, but we need to work with the underwriter in such a way they understand the benefit of all these changes, having digital twin, having an understanding of the platform. To me, I think they're absolutely great thing. So maybe you haven't answered, but you've actually given me some direction on that. So thank you. And I'm going to come back to you on that, Michael. So I'm going to give you a minute to just breathe. I'm going to go across to my friend, from Sao Paulo, which is Artur Brito. So thank you very much for, I think if I've got it right, you must be a little bit behind Michael Earp. Brazil, so your timing, you maybe, I need to be kind to you with a few questions. So let me put the first question to you, Arthur, and it's going to be very much along this. How has the shift to online working and cloud-based digital platform changed the way the engineering sector works? And now I'm putting this across to you as an engineer. How do you think the world has changed? Now, before you answer that question, I was talking to a very eminent chairman of a very large consultancy and engineering firm. And I said to him, I said, something, this working from home, I read from your annual report that productivity has gone up. I read from your annual report that profitability has gone up. I read from your annual report to say everything seems to be tickety-boo. Do you foresee any problem? Do you need an office for these people to come back into? Do you really, need an office? And he said to me, Nelson, we still need an office. And yes, people may probably go into the new world, but the truth of the matter is there's nothing as good as getting people together for innovation and creativity. So question back to you, Arthur. How has this system, this working from home, how is it changing the industry? Back to you, Arthur.
So thank you, Dr. Nelson, for the question. It's a really interesting question. And that point that you've said about the important chairman, it's a fact. I mean, the pandemic has changed our lives personally and professionally, obviously. And I think that there are two main shifts in the way we work in the engineering sector. The first one is that it decentralized the teams. So, for example, when you talk about infrastructure projects, the people were working together. They were at the office. They were there every day, having contact, and now it wasn't possible. So this created some kind of a problem at first, but then we saw it as a leverage. Now, for example, we can hire people from anywhere in the world to work online, and that leverages a lot the projects because we have clashes of cultures. People can bring different views to the project, and that increases quality, increases discussion. And for that, it is really important to have a consistent and integrated digital platform. And Microsoft with Teams has helped a lot us with that. And I believe the second one is that with the time that we spend at home, our employees started to use a part of their time, especially when the displacement to the office, to take care of themselves, to be with their family, to take care of their family. And after 2 years with that routine, it is really hard to take some steps back. And for sure, I believe that the hybrid work is a tendency. It has come to stay because it can conciliate the necessity of being at the office, of being together for a meeting, for a delivery where we need to work together, for innovation. I think contact for innovation, it's really important. And but we can also have this time to be at home some days and to do other activities, to be with our family. And this is something that our employees are demanding, especially the younger generations. They're really fond of the hybrid work. So flexibility is the trend. And when we talk about productivity, you and this chairman are quite right. We have increased our productivity, we have increased our company, we have increased our shares, but this is something we need to be aware of. When we go to the office, we have the time to work. We also have the time for the coffee. We have the time to talk with other people, to generate ideas. And we are only at home. We're focused. We're working. But I think that we keep with that for long years. The productivity becomes to go down. It's not just sustainable. We need to to have another kind of approach in a few years. And the hybrid, I think it's there for it.
Okay, thanks very much. I think you seems to be in the same school of thinking with the chairman that I was talking to, which is really good. That the 2 points you pick up, which are to me are very important, because the first one you pick up was really about decentralization of your business model, the flexibility that you created through that, and the second one, I think you use so many words, but I call it lifestyle balance, which is you can work more flexible, you have more time for family and all of that, which I think is quite in key. But the other point that you pick up there is the productivity, which I want to come back to you on. Because, we're asking the question, is it sustainable? Because 2 years lockdown, you continue to work your hours. I mean, I don't know about you. My staff think I'm a slave driver, because I work hard. If I can't get anything to do Saturday, I go back and work. And Microsoft just make it work. Sometimes I just click my staff and they say, well, I haven't got an appointment. I said, but you are supposed to be equivalent in the office. So thank you to Microsoft. It's giving us a plugin so I can call staff in. That is very good. But the point you pick up is that productivity, is it sustainable? Let me pick the technological aspect of that productivity. Now, I understand from what I've seen is that, the artificial intelligence that is now available in our sector, whether it's drone and all the stuff that we're using, is helping us to deliver and fast track and produce something maybe, 1/3 of the time. Okay, I remember in my days of being an engineer, we want to go into an existing brownfield site. We're going to take us 6 months to do the survey, to capture that, to put that together. But now you send a drone and you capture all the 3D and you digitize that. And very quickly you've got as it is. And you can sit in your office and start working on that. So do you think that will help us with the innovation? And do you think it's here to stay, or is it a short-term agenda? What's your take?
Yes, absolutely. I think that especially artificial intelligence in the last 5 years has gained a lot of space in the consulting engineer in general, and for so consequently in infrastructure projects. And as well as the artificial intelligence, other digital technologies, as the case of BEAM, IoT, they are there and they're here to stay. However, a few years ago, it was not so developed yet, and sometimes it was restricted to the organization and process of the data, especially the artificial intelligence. So it was more of a back-end use, a back-end approach. And only recently we have seen some endeavors to change the scenario, to use the AI to create actual results and actual value to the engineer and to the client, which is also really important. I can give you 2 examples here that are really recent. One of them is the use of AI in Portugal. We have seen in a metro excavation projects to detect the type of soil during the excavation. And the second one is a home example here. At TPF, we've done the feasibility study of the new Ferroeste, and we use the AI to determine the preliminary trace of 1,300 kilometers of railways.
Wow.
So this approach optimized the entire project. Once we evaluated thousands and thousands of solutions instead of 1 or 2, brought by the traditional process where you had to do everything on maps and pass to the other specialists. So it was really, really interesting. And in addition to that, it helped us to deviate from sensitive environmental areas, indigenous areas, and it sped up the environmental licensing process and gave us sustainability to the project as well. So now I believe we're shifting to the creation of value and results in AI to the client, to the engineers, and we need to use these successful cases to develop them even more, to use in other projects so that we can do better and faster studies and designs. So I believe that we're still at the beginning of what the AI can bring to the infrastructure sector. And as I said, we have the responsibility to develop it even more. And those endeavors are somehow disruptive, I believe, once they are bringing new approaches to how to do projects. And I strongly believe we can do a lot more. We have space to do a lot more. The sky's the limit.
I like the optimism that you say we are just about at the cross of beginning to take advantage. And we could do a lot more. And I'm sure Kevin, you can tell us, look, we break them all. In Microsoft, we break them all. And you in the consulting industry, you need to do exactly the same. Let me just turn it around now, because you've just articulated the benefit of using the AI to fast track the feasibility study and to do audit and referral. Now, I'm going to bring my good friend, Marcial, I hope I've got it right, from Costa Rica on board. And what I'm getting from, Arthur is that, this is good, but we are just at the cross of doing it. So my question to you is, how is the digital disruption can be made, including the government or agency that control the construction? How do we embrace this issue within the government and the agency in the construction? Because the truth of the matter is, if all the technologies are there and the client organization are not keen to move along, there's a barrier. I think that was one of the points Kevin was talking about, in their, construction client grouping. They've actually said, yeah, client, we're going to break this thing, but you're ready to work with us. So the question I'm putting across is, how does the digital disruption can be made, including in the government agenda or agency that control the construction work? So really, Marcial, the floor is yours. Can you share your thoughts on the subject?
I love the way we're arriving here, because maybe us as a construction sector, we can adopt technology faster than other sectors. And let me say just an example. When Uber appeared, when Airbnb appeared, the legal system were not ready for that. There are still many countries that doesn't know if they are freelancers, if they are employees, for example, Uber drivers. And so happened with construction. It's probably that it will be very fast for a company to adopt a BIM system or to build the blueprints through systems. But if they give it to a school and the director of that school doesn't know what does it work for, then we are not disrupting technology. We're just making technology for us. The disrupting technology means that all people using infrastructure is getting the advantage of technology. So the government sector is one of that is more involved in this side. And maybe we have always seen that the government is slower than any other sector. So for example, if we make a technology for, if we make all the blueprints on BIM systems, but the government agency that has to check the plane do not have a way to understand or to see BIM system, we are not making the change. We're just maybe having a very good system, and then we have to print so they can see, and then we are not making the disruption. So one of the things that make government to adopt these things slower is that maybe the people who works there or the people thinks that they are going to lose their jobs because the technology is going to overdrive them. And I think that that's not the way it happened. And I think all we have examples on how we were used to make meetings on tables, on round tables, and now we adapted to make it on Zoom or make it on Teams or make it on any other system. And maybe the capacitation, sharing the knowledge with the government is key in order that the real disruption happens in the world. Or we are just going to have technology. And maybe it's going to happen just like many things that we as society have, I don't know, like Concord. Concord was a really technology change in our world, but it didn't really change it because it was just for one part of the people, and it didn't change. It was maybe the smaller planes or other things that make the change and make the people could travel. What I want to say is that we have to see the whole picture, and not only the technology application, because government is a key to make it happen.
Right. I think what you are saying to me is I hear the word education, 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 education at the government level. And this is quite profound what you're saying, because if I pick that one quite correctly, is the capacity building that is required because if the industry provide the solution and the checker don't understand how to read the solution, then you have a blocker. And therefore, we have a responsibility to make sure that the client that we are providing the service for or the spec of those jobs actually get educated on what we're doing. So we call that in FIDIC capacity building. And that what the point you're saying is that, if I go back to Kevin's comment, if you bring everybody together from the client, supply chain, and everybody together, and we know the benefit of the data and the data sharing, that will help to move things forward. Now, the question I was going to raise after that is really building on the point that you just raised, which is, how do we, just make sure, how can the sector do and share knowledge in such a way that help us to achieve the innovation? Now, is he going to be the one that's going to be the product provider? Say, for example, Microsoft impose it on us, and whether you like it or not, it's an upgrade. You need to have it, an upgrade. Okay, here's an upgrade. You need to have it. Okay, is that the way it's going to be, or is it a case where there is a learning curve that the industry needs to do? I mean, how can we share data in the industry, and to the extent that it serves everybody in the food chain, from the government that set out the rules to, the agency and their team, so they're not scared that they will lose their job, to the, designer, and to the contractor, and to the asset manager. How do we share data along that line to help us? Back to you.
I think that's a very good question, because every country is different. Maybe there are countries that have a faster way to capacitate their workers, but not all over the world. Maybe there are countries in South America, maybe there are countries in Africa, maybe there are countries that they build capacity slower than maybe countries in Europe or other places. So who is responsible for? I think you get it very well, because if Microsoft, it's not saying nothing about Kevin, but if Microsoft shows, maybe they showed how to use the technology, they are experts on that, but they are expert on construction system. Maybe if just a constructor shows how to do that, maybe he's not so expert on Microsoft or in SUB or whatever. So there has to be one people in the middle, someone who is in construction system and also has adopted a technology disruption. I think that all kind of different society of engineers that we have, that maybe FIDIC is just one of that. FIDIC is making that. FIDIC is sharing knowledge and is making us conscious. It's making us. You are giving us steps. You are giving us knowledge on how we can share all that in our countries. And there are other kind of society of architects, society of consulting, society of constructor, and I think they all have to bring the topic together. And I think that FIDIC is going on a very, very advanced way, sharing this topic, making it as a committee, saying this is something that I think that's going to change the world. Because getting in the question, I think that we as society of engineers, we as society of architects are the responsible to bring the knowledge that the companies have made, just like Microsoft, and sharing with us who make the engineer happening in the world, and take it to the government, make a resume and take it to them, because I think we have the solution.
Good. It's you've just got me to the point where it's absolutely essential to bring Stacy into it, because I can see the common denominator between both of you. You are both member of the new FIDIC, digital transformation group. So you are an advocate of FIDIC. So I'm not going to press too much on that, but you did talk about one point which I thought was quite important in my picking up, because just before we move into Stacy, there's one point that you raised there. You said different continents, different parts of the world respond to change in different ways. So I call that culture to change, okay? It's culture to change. That's the key point that I was trying to look at. You also talk on one point, which you didn't use the word, but I will help you to bring the word because Kevin can understand that, is who is going to be the integrator? Who is going to pull everybody together? And you know, everything that we've talked about, the system, the insurance, the policy, there's one thing that brings everybody together: contract. So this is one area that FIDIC is very good at, and I think this is important. And this is the right time for me to bring Stacy in, because the question that I have for Stacy is, you are part of the new FIDIC Digital Transformation Group. You are a lawyer by profession, and you operate in the space. You've heard Michael talking about the distinction between technological and cyber. We talk about the professional indemnity insurance and the need to separate it. You heard from Kevin talking about, you know, we need to work in a collaborative manner and look at the data. So the question I'm putting across to you, Stacy, is very simple. How do you see the role of the technology changing with regards to the use of contract across the sector? Is the contract going to follow, or is it going to lead the way? What is the role of the contract in the process? It's $65 million question to you, Stacy. Question, your floor.
And of course, I have the answer, Nelson.
I suspect you do.
Thank you very much. Right, so I think the role of technology has the potential to change the use of contracts quite significantly in a number of ways, but I'm just going to focus on three ways. The first, I think there's the potential to change them in the substance of the contract themselves. So how they look, how they feel. In other words, how are the rights and obligations of the parties, i.e. the terms of the contracts, how are they actually set out? Are they in a natural language form, or are they embedded within code? So I think there's a real space there yet to come. We've got the contract formation. So that's the process of creating the document, for lack of a better word at the minute, and then forming that agreement between the parties. How does that process look like in the future? And then we've got the contract execution. How are the contracts themselves? How are those obligations actually performed? And are they automated? So I say all of this because we're already starting to hear about this, and we're starting to see it in different guises, and in some clauses rather than full contracts. And indeed, this is much more mature in other industries, as we all know. So if I take this in a sort of McKinsey 3 horizons framework, if I may, the sort of first horizon, or what we're seeing now, so maybe that's actually horizon 0. And by the way, I should preface this obviously depends on the jurisdiction that you're in, or Nelson, as you mentioned a moment ago, your culture or your specific industry. It really depends on what we're talking about here. But first horizon, where we are now, we are still seeing the use of pen and paper, right? So, but more often, as the case may be, we at least have electronic copies of everything, including all of the various different kinds of contract documents and specifications and so on and so forth. But rapidly, we're moving into, and indeed, people are already there in their second horizon. And that is a world where established and emerging technologies are being used. The contract is digitized, and even the whole process of the contract life cycle is digital. So this is a process whereby the entire life cycle, that being the creation, the collaboration, the negotiation, signature, storage, indeed tracking of events or milestones, and possibly even the contract renewal or termination of the contract, is a digital process or journey. Or even just part of this process, being digital, being digitized, allows parties to capture that data, learn from it, and enable data-led decision-making. And that's really important going forward, because you have created the contract in a digital manner with structured data in a repository with auditing trails and so forth. So we're talking about formation, tracking of events, learning from those insights in your contract portfolio so that you can optimize performance, minimize risks, and be a company that is led by data. So, you know, maybe some of us might be here, others of us, that's on the next horizon. If we want to do even more further afar horizon scanning, though some actually are very close, I'd say. We do have the third horizon, that being where you've got new technologies creating new business in a new way. Where are the contracts at with this? Where will they be? here, I think what we're going to be seeing, obviously, is not only technology embedded in the formation of the contract and the form of it, but the execution of the contract. And obviously, I'm referring to smart contracts here, not to go into the detail of it because of time. I mean, a smart contract is a legally, depending on your jurisdiction, a legally binding contract in which some or all of the contract obligations are defined in and or performed automatically by a computer program. So just for those who are not aware of a smart contract, think of it like a vending machine. This has been an analogy used time and time again, but if you put your money into the vending machine, you choose your snack selection, your snack is dispensed, right? That's the process. If X happens, then execute Y. And we're starting to see this now in the construction engineering industries. Take, for example, perhaps a delivery is made to site. You have sensors, you have whatever one might need to record that delivery, and then a direct payment is made. And the clauses are embedded and created to enable that to happen. And so I'll just give you an example here. In the UK, there was a sort of a test project carried out on smart clauses, not necessarily smart contracts. It was called the Weather Ledger, and I encourage you to have a look if you're interested in this area. And that was, apologies, not the FIDIC contract, but it was based around what we have here in the UK, the NEC form of contract. And in that project, they set up weather sensors on site and various different blockchains and so forth. But if the weather conditions were met, and the sensors were obviously linked to the various different data centers and so forth, and plus the contract conditions were met, then a valid compensation event was deemed to be valid. So there we have it. I'm just, those are the sort of three different models, how I think we're seeing contracts changing and the use of technology within them. If you do want to look into smart contracts further, here in the UK, the Law Commission produced a report, which is very helpful in understanding the various different kinds of smart contracts. And you can find that on their website. That was published back in November of 2021. So I think we're going to see a lot in this space with contracts and the use of technology in a number of different areas.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stacey. I think you've just given sort of an insight to what is going to be the action of the Digital Transformation Committee that we've set up, because I mean, I think you're putting a challenge out. I do like the way you talked about the three ways that you identify that you need to have a digital system embedded in the whole process in those three ways, and I think that's important. So the question I was going to put across, I think you seems to be implying that where we're moving on is the way for the future, and there are test cases that are actually in place. So from your experience, what is the biggest opportunity or potential disruptor do you see across the infrastructure landscape right now? And I'm definitely saying that because before you respond to that, Stacey, there's some buzzword going on. We talk about drone, we talk about digital twin, we've had issue about cyber issue, we've had all sorts of issue about, all sorts of things that come into it. And I'm asking the question, what is the biggest one that will cause us to change? Which one do you think it is, Stacey? Or it hasn't appeared on your radar yet, is it?
I'm gonna go with two. I think there are a number of technologies that were listed in the recent just released today FIDIC report, obviously, but I'm going to go with two, which are not necessarily technologies. I'm going to go with client requirements, and I think there's a big one being client requirements. I mean, where the client is driving things like circular economy, sustainability, carbon requirements, new deliverables. So it's not just about the completing building or asset or infrastructure now, it's about the data surrounding it. And it's about the solution that companies need the solution, not just the services or products, but the solutions that businesses need to provide to their clients. So I think there's a real drive or disruptor from some more sophisticated clients about what they're requiring that companies have to react to, that the industry has to react to. And the second thing that I think I have to say as a lawyer is I think that the legislation and the regulation requirements are going to drive and disrupt innovation and the infrastructure. So, I mean, just one example here in the UK would be the building safety bill. So we will be having more enhanced requirements here in the UK around building safety. And one of those is the golden thread. And that's information and data that needs to be kept in a digital format, kept up to date, kept maintained throughout the life cycles, the life cycle of an asset. And that is about a building, you know, that allows someone to understand the building and keep it safe, as well as encompassing information management to ensure that that's accurate, understandable, and can be easily accessed, which no doubt will cause some issues going forward. So I think legislation and regulation requirements and how we respond to them with the use of technology is going to be a good enabler and disruptor.
Well, Stacy, thank you very much. I see the floor is full of all sorts of questions coming through, and I'm really delighted about that because this is the time where we really need to open the question to the floor. I've put 2 questions to you all, and I've got a bunch of questions that I could put across to you. But I think, you know, if we're really going to engage, you know, and actually get the benefit of the people who are with us, over 200-300 people, it'd be interesting to actually pick up on what is coming through from the chat in terms of question. So while I'm waiting for questions to be put across to me, there is quite a lot, but I would just want to go back into the question that, you know, Michael put on, because he was separating cyber and also the issue about technological issue. And I do remember in some of our journey, Michael, we talk in terms of PII. And you know that I'm going to get you back on this one. And I also remember Kevin talking earlier on in his questioning about collaborative approach. And one of the issues that we had in the early stage of, project insurance and issue was about, you know, how do we know that we are all on the same boat? I also hear from Stacy to say, you know, if there's going to be a disruptor, will be client requirement, that one of them is critical and the other one is legislator. So let me put it back into Michael's point of view. Do you think the insurance market is truly, open-minded to embrace all this change that is coming through into the market? Or are they going to be very conservative to say, well, you either have to have your PII and then you have your cyber, you have other bits, you have your construction. If we are looking at a joined up approach where Stacy is saying you have a digital contract, you have a smart contract, everybody's sharing the data, you can see changes either to the specification and everything. Do you think the insurance market is ready for that, or are they going to follow?
No, they're not ready.
I'm glad you said
that. I think hearts and minds are a juxtaposition at the moment. I think they would like to think that they are ready and could be a all-embracing stakeholder partner on projects. But unfortunately, we are currently in a position, particularly on professional indemnity, professional liability, where the losses that happened as a result of the dash for cash after the global financial crisis, all those claims are coming through now. And so underwriters are at the moment having to right the ship. They've been doing so for the last 2 or 3 years. There are good signs that the Lloyd's report on the syndicates' profitability came out last week. And we are definitely seeing that some of the syndicates have righted the ship and things are going to a slightly better view going forward. However, there was 10 years of rate reduction. We've had less than 3 years of rate increase. And the rates are not even back to pre-GFC, global financial crisis basis. The self-insured retentions haven't increased as the size of projects have increased, as growth has increased. So I think there's a long way to get there. But if you ask an underwriter, do they want to be part of this digital transformation journey? Together with, I've been sitting in meetings for the last few weeks with different clients. They're all talking about the climate change, how we're going to prepare ourselves for net zero. Those two things, digital transformation and net zero and how to get there, occupy probably 50% of all the presentations by the architects and engineers, the insurance company will get there dragging and screaming, but they've got their own house to sort out first, Nelson. Okay. So I think that's the answer.
That's the answer.
Went on a bit.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I know I can always get the right, very objective coming from you. But I'm going to put other question across. There is a lot of question coming from the floor. And for those who are putting questions from the floor, please be kind to us. We're going to try and paraphrase it. It may not be for word, just that at least we can deal with the question. So there is a question to the panelists from, I think it's Von Barrett. He said, working in the high-tech industry as a Silicon Valley major player venture into the construction industry via data center, build and telecom infrastructure network construction. I see this digital disruption play out in the real time. So what he's saying is in the Silicon Valley, the digital transformation is happening real time, but in our sector, we're a bit slow, in responding to that. Now, I did talk about this earlier, and I think I remember Marcial was also issued the percent. Are we going to wait for somebody to come up with the issue? Are we looking for the like of Microsoft to be the disruptor and to be the integrator that brings us together? So Stacy, what's your view about that? What's your view about that? It's happening in other sectors very rapidly. What is holding us back?
What's holding us back? I think one, I don't think people should look to the contracts to sort that out. I think it's about people, and I think it's about mindsets. I definitely wouldn't let lawyers get in the way. But obviously, when you are trying to drive something forward, it's about change and about bringing on board a different culture. I think that with the infrastructure, energy, architectural sectors, things have been done in a particular way for a particularly long time, and bringing new technologies in, I think it's bringing them in a particular way that's going to, well, I suppose you've got different views, don't you? And harking back to Graham and the report, is there going to be a big disruptor coming in, or are we going to, embrace technology, bit by bit and enhance it that way? I think we're going to see in different sectors a bit of everything, actually. Some players will fall off, some will embrace and carry forward. But I do think it's about people and mindsets and collaboration. And I think contracts will, need to change in some respects, which will be difficult considering the longevity of them.
Thank you very much. So it's people, mindset, and collaboration. That was my biggest takeaway from there. We can talk about technology. If the mind and heart are not there for a change, ain't gonna happen. And I think really, doesn't matter how sophisticated it is, it wouldn't happen. But I suspect that back of my mind, when you are forced to do, you have no choice. And there goes with your issue about legislation, if I've got to try. If you're forced to do it because of legislation, then you have no choice. Because I do remember in the case of UK, when we were looking at the adjudication clause in the contract and it became enforceable, whether it's in the contract or not, because legislation put it into adjudication clause, that happened. BIM become, level 1 standard, that happened. So I do take your point that, legislation can help to move things forward. The other question that's coming from the floor, maybe to you, Stacy, as well, and maybe you're not familiar with FIDIC contract, but if you are, the question is, how are FIDIC contract going to be updated or amended to facilitate digital transformation, given that the laws related to digital transformation, including privacy and smart contract, vary in different jurisdictions? Now, Stacy, do you want to have a go at this, or do you want me to, to give you my take on it? What's your take?
I'm not going to have a go on it, but okay. I do want to say that contracts and international standards do have the ability to go cross-jurisdictional. And if one example of looking at that is the ISO 19650, and that's around BIM, and the way that you can implement the ISO 19650 into different jurisdictions with the annexes and the appendices. So things can be thought across multi-jurisdictions. I'll probably leave that there, Nelson, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Stacey. I'm really pleased that you said that, because without plugging in, for any document, any contract, I think when the world is changing, it's absolutely imperative that what we have to change. I mean, we are now talking about this, and Michael talked about it. Sometimes we spend hours in the aircraft to get to a point where we're meeting, but when we are forced to make the change, then we have to change. I think the view I'm getting is really that it doesn't matter what contract. This is the way the world is going, and we need to embrace it. BIM is something that's coming into play, and it's now the language that everybody uses around the world. We're now talking about smart contracts that can even go down to actually actualizing and doing payment subject to variable, factor in the contract, whether it's weather or the quantity of the dig or all of that. So we need to be mindful of that. And that's very important. The other question that's coming from the floor, which I really want to put across, if I can get this is a long and windy one, but I'll do the best I can, is to all the panelists who say, question to the FIDIC Digital Transformation Group. In the advent of BIM and VDCs, several risks were foreseen, in particular the question of model ownership and intellectual property. Also, how might BIM to the field of executor contractor from critical review of design, document, and shift liability further to the design engineer. This is a long and windy one. I suspect the question is that how is the FIDIC, going to migrate and actually embrace digital transformation? Let me give you my view on it, and maybe I'll probably take the pen away from the panelists. We've just formed up the Digital Transformation Committee. The plan for that is because the board organized and recognized that we need to embrace this thing. And the question we've been asking ourselves is, are we going to wait and be an observer and jump in? Are we going to embrace it? Or are we going to be a data organization? I think we are very much in the latter, that we want to embrace it. Do we have the answer? The answer is no. Have we got the right brain around the world within our Digital Transformation Committee? I believe so. Are we going to look at that? Yes. If you look at the terms of reference, these are the things we are looking at to see how we can be at the vanguard of that change and can come up with recommendations that help us. Now, Stacy talked about taking the ISO 19650 into consideration, which look at the BIM, and then application of jurisdiction. That may be the way we need to go. But I think if there's one thing we can do within FIDIC, is one about opening this conversation up. It's not restrictive to one jurisdiction, it's across jurisdiction. It's sharing best knowledge and best practice. And if we can bring best knowledge, best practice together from different parts of the world and produce something, that something is available. Now, I heard the word earlier on about capacity building. Capacity building is not going to happen if you don't have the best example in the world. So there is a lot of things we can pick up in that process. So I'm just going to try and assume that we don't have the solution, but I do believe that we can work towards getting a solution coming through. So I'm trying to pick up as many as possible questions. There is another one also from Nepal. Said, what are the provision FIDIC has made to make practitioner updated on the new development? Well, I think Marcial talked about it. This is part of the provision. We are in that conversation and we are trying to make sure that we don't miss anything out. But it will be interesting to see what Kevin, said earlier on about the example that is being done through Anglia. So Kevin, can I bring you back into that? Let's take a broad view on the subject. You are Microsoft. Yes, you may be based in UK, but you're providing a global solution that is adaptable with different jurisdictions. If I were to push it back to you, Kevin, when you got your new product, how do you get this new product in place? Before you answer that, I know we are all paying by individual head use, and I know we have to do that update, and I know that sometimes we don't have a choice, but I know somehow you need to help us so that we can embrace it. So how do you get that message across? And people don't have any choice than to take it on board. So the driver, is he going to be technology provider, or is it going to be us that is going to call for change? So Kevin, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'll state Microsoft's purpose. So Microsoft's mission globally is to empower every organization and individual on the planet to achieve more. So Microsoft is an enabler to the outcomes that organizations and individuals want to achieve. So will we be an organization that kind of leads digital transformation? No. Will we be an organization that supports other organizations to achieve their outcomes? Definitely yes. So if you think about that alliance model, what we're doing now is moving away from being a kind of a traditional technology vendor to more of a technology partner. So once an organization has bought our technology, our role then is to help them understand how to drive the best value from that technology. So we won't be an organisation that would kind of fulfil that integrator role. What we definitely would be, though, is a trusted partner and advisor within that alliance model to help organisations in their digital transformation.
So I hear the word trusted partner. That's the language that we use in our space. Who are the consulting engineers there can answer that question? I hear that word again and again, the trusted advisor. I think Microsoft is nicked that now. It's not going to go trusted, partner. I like that. So Microsoft, I'm being banging on your door very quickly to see how can we bring the Microsoft global view with the FIDIC global view to help the industry to move forward, because this partnering agenda that is running in one country may be a model for another country. And I do hear the word earlier on that we need to be mindful of the jurisdiction. Stacy said that because, whether it's a civil code or whether it's common law, there are different issues that comes into play. And this goes into the insurance as well, as to what is in, what is out. And likewise, we cannot assume that FIDIC contract is taken for granted. I think whatever contract, and I'm a big advocate of any contract around the world, whatever suits you in terms of your issue. What I'm picking up, that I'm picking from the floor, is that if the world is about partnering, it's about trust, and it's about people coming together, because, with COVID, we had no choice. We had to find a different way to work very quickly. I remember one of the panelists said, well, what used to take 8 months or 8 years, we did it in 2 months or 3 months. That's the spirit. That's the spirit. So the question I want to put across to each and one of you, and I'm going to start with Kevin, because it started Kevin, and you seem to be informed, not because I want to have a go on Microsoft, but I think, I should do anyway, is that what is your word of advice, Kevin, to you that you do it globally, and you are the heart of every organization in the thick of it? I have a question. Sometimes you think we don't have a choice, but I think you have a product that everybody buys, okay? They're competitors, let's be honest. But let's come back to the point, is that when you give us the update and we do the update, we don't question it. And how do you overcome the challenge of people don't want to deal with that update? Because what I hear from Stacy is people and culture and behavior. You can come up with technology, and if nobody wants to accept those technology, it ain't gonna work. In the case of COVID, we have no choice. We couldn't go anywhere, and then we have to work with that. So in your point, what would be your word that you want to share with us in terms of the collaboration? Because I hear the word loud and clear that you want to be a trusted partner. What is the word that you want to leave with us, Kevin, that will be the singing throw for Microsoft? Because we're coming towards the end. We're coming towards the end now. We've got a few minutes to go. So I want to start with you, Kevin.
Yeah, no problems. I'm not going to say collaboration again, because I've said that enough. What I will say, though, to kind of accompany that, is education. So you pick up on the point of culture and the adoption challenges with technology, and a lot of that comes down to education, helping people understand the value to them, the value to their business, so that they can adopt that technology and transform their lives. So I think, as well as collaboration, the other thing that we have to get right to enable the pace at which we need to move is education.
Thanks very much, Kevin. So I'm going to go, Michael. You've educated us, some of us who are not savvy, in the issue about what I call cyber and the difference between technology, and we've dabbled into what is in, what is not in. And now your recommendation to me, if I get it correctly, is have a separate policy. Have a separate policy, and be careful of exclusion. And I get that quite right. Be careful of exclusion. But then you said to us, but we still need to have this open, because the market is responding. The market is not leading because we are lagging because of historical. So what is your word of advice going forward? The technology is here, there's going to be a disruptor. The market is not leading. We have to, because you're based on historical. What is your word of advice? Bearing in mind, we are still lagging behind the global meltdown in terms of pricing. What is the word of advice?
I think the main word of advice is make sure that when you're entering into a new contract, that you, when the contracts are drawn up, that you make sure that you understand all the risks that are current and present today, and how the insurance market can respond today. Too often I am seeing contracts drawn up with people advising owners in particular, saying you need this insurance, that insurance, and whatever. Those insurances aren't available or may not be the appropriate insurances. So the one thing I'd say is to any owner and to any architect engineer, when they're starting and thinking about the project, involve someone from the insurance industry very early to make sure that what's been put in those contracts are deliverable. Because today, a lot of people have single project policies that you just cannot get extended. And the contracts don't make provisions for that. So that's my word of advice. Okay. Bring insurance advisors on board early.
Okay. I heard that word is being used because it's early involvement. It was called in UK early contractor involvement. So I hear the word is early consultant involved now, early insurance involvement. So bring your broker on board. That's the message I'm getting across. Bring your broker on board. Don't leave any stone unturned. Don't assume anything that you don't know what it is. You may be smart in design. You may be smart architect, but for God's sake, you may not be smart in insurance. Get the people who knows it very well. So I take that from Arthur. I'm going to come back to you. Now, from your point of view, you know the market very well. You know what the situation is. And I'm asking the question, what is the word of advice that you want to give to us? Bearing in mind, the audience are completely from different parts of the world, and they have different jurisdiction, different culture, and all this stuff that we talked about. People, education. What would be your advice?
I think my word of advice would be two little words to be quick here, and it's innovation and adaptability. Today, we live in a world where everything is changing so quickly with exponential technologies, exponential organizations. And so we need to adapt and we need to innovate, not just to grow, but to survive. Otherwise, we're going to stay behind. And we as companies, I think we're going to die. So we need to innovate and adapt. And it reflects in different cultures. We're going to adapt in different ways. But I think the spirit is the same.
Okay, adapt or die. The spirit is the same. That's what I pick. Adapt or die. You're gonna have to change. If you're not in the change, you're gonna go. You're gonna go. This is what Graham said. If you're not a data company, you're gonna go. You'll be obsolete. Okay. There's so many companies out there that used to be, but they're no longer in existence. But I'm not gonna go there. Okay. So I'm gonna go to myself, my friend. So what is your advice that everybody here, whether you are a client or government agents or consultant or lawyers who are operating in our sector, digital disruption is here, is going to happen, whether we like it or not, is here to stay. Adapt or die. That sounds very hard. So what's your take?
I think it's easy. It's a word easy. Agreement. If we, I would like to use the example that I used before. It comes Airbnb. I want to be the hotel that complains the Airbnb is there, or I want to be the hotel that put my rooms on Airbnb. I think that none. We don't have to go to a site. We have to build the change. We have to build the change with all the parts. If we build the change, we don't have to argue with the other parts. We don't have to leave all that. We don't have to be the taxi driver that is mad at Uber. I think that we have to build the agreement so that the digital disruption comes from all the parts and not only from one. That's our goal.
So I get, if you're a black cab driver in London, what you are saying, be careful. Uber is here to stay. If it's not Uber, it will be Bolt. If it's not Bolt, it will be X, Y, and Z. There will be others. If you're a black cab driver, you need to change your mindset. I take that point. So I'm going to come back to Stacy. Stacy, you've heard them. And a lot of people, everything said in construction is all about the contract. It's all about the contract. It's all about the relationship. It's all about the behavior. You said one thing, it's about people and it's about culture. What is the message about smart contract? Is it here or is it something we are just dabbling about out there? And how soon do we need to move? What is your word of encouragement? We have 1 minute to finish.
Considering we have 1 minute to finish, I'm going to say that we've been talking about collaboration. It's also about communication and managing people's expectations and thinking about this holistically, thinking about it in enough detail so that you can manage those expectations. What are the unexpected outcomes of innovation or the use of new technology? And communication, collaboration. I shall leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Stacy. Thank you very much for that. I mean, without further ado, I'm going to try and wrap up. I want to try and finish on time. Our industry is always blamed that we don't finish on time. There's a prolongation, there's delay, there's disruption, there's liquidated damages. Not on FIDIC account. There will not be liquidated damage. We're going to finish on time. So I'm going to take this opportunity to try and wrap up. And really, we finish question and answer. Second question that we're going to put, is the sector innovating and adapting new technology fast enough to meet the SDG? This is the second question. Please, can you vote? Opportunity for you to vote now. Is the sector innovating and adapting new technology fast enough to meet the SDG? And maybe brave enough to meet the net zero? Who wants to be in that position? Answer yes or no. What is the answer? Any feedback on that? Any feedback on that? Is the sector innovating and adapting new technology fast enough to meet the SDG? Please, time to vote. Time to vote. Do we have an answer? I suspect he's going to say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. What do I hear from you? Lisa, do we have the answer? Thank you very much.
Still a few more to vote.
Well, a few more votes. Yeah, please, time for you to vote. Okay, we need to wrap up. As people are thinking about that, should be a straightforward yes or no answer. Is the sector innovating and adapting new technology fast enough to meet the SDG? My gut feeling is no. Sad. It's sad to hear that. But I think what I'm saying is that time for us to move forward. We need to adapt. We need to embrace. So thank you very much, Lisa. Let's move on to the next slide. It's good to hear that the first question we put across saying we're not doing enough. Second, is saying we're not doing enough. There's an opportunity to move forward. Let me give you my final thought. I've tried to summarize as I went through the process, and I do not intend to go back. But I think what I hear again and again from Kevin, from Michael, and from Marcella and Arthur, and also Stacy, is change is here. We have no choice. We have to embrace it. You can either stay behind and not be observer. You may go there at your own peril, or you embrace it. The report that's been published, and Graham talked about that, is full of thought with a lot of ideas. And I think this is giving us an opportunity to move forward. We don't pretend to have a solution to the problem. What we've tried to do is to put the problem out there and we can discuss it. And I'm extremely grateful for all the panelists who have a contribution from technology provider, Microsoft, we know that. Contribution from one of the biggest insurance provider in the world, in Aon. That's fantastic to get that perspective. Contribution also from Marcel as well, and also from Arthur, from client, and from consulting engineer, and also from Fenwick Elliott. Stacy, thank you very much for all your contribution. I think you've given us some food for thought on this we need to look at. I'm not going to try and repeat everything you've done because I've tried to pick it up as we went through. But my closing comment is FIDIC will ensure that this latest report continues to form a growing bank of evidence and engagement with the widest set of stakeholders in the infrastructure sector on digital and technology issues to ensure that we can meet the significant challenges ahead of us. This is what we need to do. Some of you are in the new digital transformation committee we've set up. No pressure. I'll be looking forward to working with you to see how we develop products and solutions that become part of our capacity building. Some of you are outside that committee and you will want to be what I call trusted partner. And we want you to be trusted partner. We wanted you to be trusted partner in everything that we do. I know Aon is doing that very well. Fenwick Elliott does that everywhere. I would like to see that with Microsoft, so we can bring your idea, your best in class together. And with that in mind, I'm really pleased to say thank you very much to all our panelists for your time and for the energy and the homework that you have to do. Thank you to Graham for pulling this report together. Without that, it would have been very difficult to achieve. And for some of you who are panelists that I woke up early in the morning, I bow down to you and thank you very much. And forgive me for waking up, Michael. I'm talking about, Marcella, what I'm talking about. And Arthur, what I'm talking about. For Stacy, you are very much on board. And also for Kevin, you're on board. So thank you very much. Goes on to the next slide, really to try and bring you up to speed. We have other activities which are ongoing. We have our contract users conference in May. We have the North American one, we have the European one coming through, and we have the Asian and the Australian one. Those are coming through. Please, if you are watching, get engaged, get involved. I think some of you who are panelists are also speaking at there. Next slide, please. I just want to let you know that we have our Global Infrastructure Conference coming up in September. Michael's already told me he's coming because he is a trusted partner. He's coming over. I know that for sure. If you haven't booked, please check yourself and make sure there will be a section for risk management. There will be a section for technology. There will be a section to do with cybersecurity. So these are the things we're going to look at. So please register if you have not. We will be opening the registration up very, very quickly. And then moving on swiftly to the next slide, just to remind you, during the gala event, we are going to showcase the best project of the year. So whether you are a consulting firm or you're a member association or whether you are actually a project owner, please submit your project, for an award during the conference in Geneva. Also for our future leaders, the young ones, young guns, the new ideas, the breaking barrier people, put yourself forward, and our member association also put yourself forward. So that is coming through, opportunity to showcase the best in our industry. And finally, on behalf of Tony Barry and our two vice presidents, I say thank you very much to everybody who's participated in this particular webinar. This has been absolutely great to engage in the conversation. And I'm going to close out to say thank you to the team, to Liz, to Chanel, to the Nadia, and to Andy, and to Graham, and all the team behind in the hosting, because you guys, you make it look good, but you do all the work. I don't want to take the glory. I'm going to put it back to you. I'm spreading the love. Thank you very much. And for those who are participating around the world, massive thank you for joining us. I hope you've learned something. I hope you can pick something this way. This particular program will be on our website very quickly, and you can pick it up on YouTube. So I'm going to close that out in my usual format. Wherever you are, keep safe, take care, God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.